So I have two projects effectively for this demonstration. The first one is the branding project, which this is the project that I have the writing guidelines in. And I've created a pretty simple content model that stores tone of voice, that stores banned phrases, and that stores examples of compliant content and text. Really, these are all just rich text elements right now. You could break it down into a more separated schema, but for the sake of the example, I just decided to put it into rich text. So see banned phrases, here are some examples of banned phrases that should be avoided. A revolutionary change is cliche. We also have some compliant copy showing good examples of text. And then also the tone of voice is really a big focus here, where, for example, Karma Health wants to balance casualness with professionalism. So this is all rich text content coming from a Kontent.ai project that really sits on its own. You can have a marketing team come into this content project and tweak these guidelines, create new ones. You could create content types that have visual guidelines. You could separate this into more modular elements, but basically you would have full control in a headless way to creating your brand guidelines. And just to talk about the benefits of that, this means you can distribute these guidelines over multiple channels over API. So if you want to feed this into automations or workflows, it's available over our API. If you wanted to create mobile apps or websites, you can create a site that pulls this in as the content. And in fact, I've actually done that with a small React app that just has Karma Health's writing guidelines, and it just pulls in that information that I shared there. So tone of voice, banned phrases, and example content. So that's something that your employees can also just reference if they want to pull up the web page just to reference these guidelines. The other piece of this is the actual project that will be leveraging the guidelines. So this is our content project that has the brand guidelines. Now let's say that we're Karma Health, we're creating blog posts, and we want to have an automation that checks the content that we've created here against those brand guidelines, and we want to use an external AI to evaluate and analyze the text here to make sure that we're meeting our brand guidelines. So I've created a workflow step in this content project called AI Content Review. Once we use that workflow step, this effectively is going to reach out to Pipedream, which is where I have created a webhook trigger that goes through several steps. So I did have to write some code, but Pipedream makes this pretty easy. I was actually really impressed with how easy it was just to sort of set up this workflow. So here we have the trigger. So this is where the workflow step in content is reaching out to. And we can see here that we have system data and we have a message that came from Kontent.ai about that action that took place. So the AI automation actually kicked off. That then leads into a script that I've written a small webhook function here, most of it just boilerplate, honestly, from our open source repos, leveraging the delivery SDK, JavaScript delivery SDK, and then also a webhook helper that helps with validating the webhook signatures, which is also part of another repo that we have in the Kontent.ai GitHub. So this triggers hit. We go and validate that it's a legitimate request from our Karma Health project. From there, I use the delivery client to go get, I instantiate and initialize the delivery client. I actually go get the content item from the Karma Health, so that vaccine item. I use the code name that is stored in the body of the webhook request to make that request to Kontent.ai to get the actual item. And then I start splitting out the elements of that blog post into different constants that I can then strip out any of the rich text HTML markup that is included in the Kontent.ai rich text elements. So I pulled those out. I also pulled them out so I could do some debugging, making sure that we're working on the right content item. But ultimately, the big step I do here is cleaning out a lot of the HTML that is in the response. So we get that content item variant. You can see here in the return data in Pipedream that it's the vaccine response and vaccine blog post introduction and body content without any of the HTML markup. So that's coming from the Karma Health project, which is the actual blog post content. But next we want to actually get the brand guidelines that are established in the brand project, that we want those guidelines to scale across multiple projects and be the source of truth for branding guidelines. So we do a lot of the same steps here. We utilize the Kontent.ai SDK to go to that brand environment. We grab those Karma Health writing guidelines. I've just hard-coded the code name in here because we have all of the guidelines in a single item. You could, of course, write this in a different way and in multiple items, or you can make it more dynamic. That's up to you, but I just went for the simple path here. Then I extract each of those guideline sections, so the tone, example copy, brand phrases, and then I construct an object here that just has those three elements as separate objects in it. And why I did that was I was running into some limitations and timeouts with the AI, which I used Claude to actually evaluate the content in the brand guidelines. Since I was hitting some limits, I wanted to split it out into separate objects so I could format those objects in a more clear structure that the LLM will better understand. And I'm avoiding hitting some of those limitations or timeouts by breaking it into smaller chunks. So we get those brand guidelines, and I run through some steps here. And Pipedream is pretty great because it has some pre-made options to add AI steps. It supports right now OpenAI, ChatGPT as some relatively pre-made steps. And also there's Claude with the various models, Sonnet 4, Opus, and a different array of models that you can select from. So we have the brand guidelines. We've chunked it out into tone examples, so proper compliant examples, and band phrases. I've split those out into different requests to Claude, Sonnet 4. And you could be more, probably more performant with this request. You could format this in probably a more optimized way, but I just wanted to see what the capability was from a high level. So I essentially am taking that tone from the brand guidelines, that object, the tone object, and I'm telling it to reformat it, do away with the HTML markup, and actually structure this in an easy to digest, easy to ingest JSON structure that will allow the AI to better analyze the contents and make better evaluations of the actual content that's coming from the blog post article. So this format was actually inspired by me prompting Claude and asking in several different ways, what is an easy to digest format for you if you need to do compliance checks on HTML content? And it gave me a lot of great recommendations about how the HTML can be distracting, especially if there's proprietary elements in there. And it provided this very simple do-don't categorization and an array of examples of compliant and non-compliant, which actually makes a lot of sense. So I'm effectively telling for each of these types of guidelines, Claude to format the HTML into this JSON structure that it actually recommended to me. So this is going to go through and format the tone guidelines. We can actually take a look here at the return that it gave me on a successful run of this. If I take a look in the content object, you can see that it has tone of voice guidelines for Karma Health, and it breaks it into a rules array where this rule is, do this, maintain a casual and friendly tone while staying professional. And if we take a look at our tone of voice in the content as written in Kontent.ai, it's saying maintain a casual and friendly tone. So here we have all that HTML markup and styling and maybe some proprietary, tags in here, whereas here Claude has created a JSON schema that is more to the point about what I'm going to ask it to do later. So that is how it's reformatted there. We then send this content to the assistant, which the prompt is essentially your brand compliance assistant. Here are those different chunks of brand guidelines that you've formatted into JSON. And here is the content from the article that I sent. And I'm telling Claude to list all the deviations, the banned words, visual style, and suggest corrections, and keep the output simple and readable. So we can actually take a look at what it provided. If I close some of these steps, so we don't want the trigger, we don't want that, we don't want this. We want it's going to be on the next one because we actually upsert the outputs of what the assistant came up with to Kontent.ai. And you can see here at the bottom in the note, I'm just upserting the compliance review into the notes of the content item. You can see that it has a list of compliant elements, deviations, and it starts to go through that content and recommendations. We're just going to test this and upsert it to our content project. We'll pull that up. And it's still probably running in the background, so we'll reload. Yeah, so you can see that the upsert from Pipedream worked. It transitioned the content item into the peer review step, so out of the AI compliance check step or the AI compliance review step. And we can see in the note right now, I'm just upserting the recommendations in the notes. So you can see positive compliance elements. It says, it has a professional and informative tone that's appropriate. It outlines some tone deviations, so missing a personal voice. It's overly formal. There's no use of we. There's some suggested corrections in here and some tips and concrete examples. And what's interesting is it provides an overall recommendation, which I thought was particularly helpful, where it says, while the content is informative and accurate, it needs to be rewritten with a warmer, more inclusive tone, which interestingly enough, that is baked into the tone of voice that we can take from the raw content in the brand guidelines. So Karma Health wants to be friendly, empathetic. They want to be thoughtful and authentic. So it's really an emotionally based tone of voice rather than just pure cold academic accuracy that this organization is trying to embody with their content. So I think that's a decent recommendation based on how the article was written and some of the content that is in here. So overall, we accomplished our goals of putting some branding guidelines in a universal project that can be distributed over multiple projects, multiple channels. We used it to power the AI recommendations. We used webhooks and Pipedream to format these guidelines in a way that the AI could actually break down the guidelines into digestible chunks and then make evaluations against the body content and introduction content in the article we fed it. And then we had it upsert those recommendations directly into the content item within Kontent.ai in the notes section. But this was just a proof of concept and proof of value here. There are so many other things you could do with this type of workflow.